Welcome to episode 2 of the WoodworkersResource.com video podcast. I'm your host, Craig Stevens. In this episode, we're going to be looking at two different topics. First, I thought an official shop tour was in order. I know in the last episode, you got to see quite a bit of my shop in the background. But in this episode, I wanted to show you the area that I have to work in, the tools that I use, and the different workstations that I have set up, and how material flows through those workstations to reach a finished product. Second thing that we'll look at is, as we do the shop tour, there's improvements and upgrades that I want to make in all the workstations in my shop. All these improvements and upgrades that we'll talk about will be topics for future video podcasts. I'm selfishly going to be using these videos as the motivational kick in the pants that I need to make these improvements and upgrades happen. So, without further ado, walk this way. Please watch your step. Oh, and no touching the tools, please. This is the first workstation that I come to when I start a new project in the shop. Lumber is brought in through the garage door, is then stored in the lumber rack, and then when it's ready to be used, I normally cut it to length with the miter saw. So this is where it all begins. So I thought what we'd look at first is the lumber storage rack. As you can see up top, the way that it's hung, it's actually bolted into the sill plate of my house. I have a garage workshop, but it's actually in the basement of my house. The wall you're looking at is actually underground. So by bolting it to the sill plate, it's actually hanging on top of the wall and not just bolted into the wall where it can have pressure pulling against it. So by doing that, it can hold actually a lot more weight. I normally don't carry this much lumber in storage at any one time. This is actually all lumber left over from previous projects that I built in the last few months. I've got some white pine, some hard maple, mahogany, some cherry, and even some wormy chestnut that I have a project in mind for. So, with all that said, I probably have a little bit more weight on there than I would like. I think a good idea would be to tell my wife that I have to get some projects built. Otherwise, our house may fall in. I think that'll work. Let's take a closer look at the miter saw station. What I want to show you is the process that I go through to cutting a board to length. Sounds simple enough, and it is. But let's throw a monkey wrench in it. What if you need 24 boards cut to 24 inches? Then it becomes a whole lot more of a hassle when you have to use a tape measure. Let me show you how I do it. Take a board, and again, let's just use our example and say that we need to cut it to 24 inches. We move our saw stop down on the fence to where it reads 24 inches on the measuring tape that sits on top. Now we take our board, slide it underneath the saw stop, and bring it down to just the kerf of the saw blade so that we can get a cut to get a perpendicular or squared edge on the end. We then turn the board around, put that squared edge against the saw stop that's reading 24 inches, we make our cut. And we can make cuts all day, 7 days a week, and still get the same length every single time. It's more accurate, it's faster, and it's just a better way to do it when you have multiple boards to cut to the same length. This work group of tools that we'll look at now is the heart of my shop. It contains the joiner, the table saw, and the thickness planer. All three of these tools should be grouped together for two reasons. First, they're all used in conjunction with stock preparation. So it's just going to save you time and footsteps the closer that you can group these three tools together. Second, for dust collection. These three tools, hands down, will produce more sawdust than all the other tools that you have in your shop combined. So if you can have them grouped together, it's just going to be much easier to remove that sawdust, whether you're using a central dust collection system like I have, or a shop vac. Okay, so next what I wanted to do is just briefly show you how each of these tools are used in stock preparation. Our board is taken from the miter saw station where it's been cut to length. It's brought over to the joiner where a surface is run across the cutter heads to flatten it, brought up on edge, and then an edge is jointed. It's brought over to the thickness planer to get the correct thickness that we're looking for. Then it's brought over to the table saw, where that jointed edge that we got here is placed against the fence. You dial in the correct width that you want, then run it through the table saw. As you can see, this process is made much simpler using these 3 stationary power tools. Now, I know that's just a brief look into how stock preparation is done, and we will do a separate video podcast for each of these stationary power tools in the future. The second project that we'll be looking at building in this workstation area is an upgrade to the tool stand for my thickness planer. I've been using this old Black & Decker Workmate bench for a tool stand for years and years and years for my thickness planer. But I think it is time for an upgrade. So what we'll be looking at doing is building a mobile tool cabinet that's sturdy enough to support the weight of this thickness planer, have some storage underneath, locking casters on the bottom to provide stability for when the thickness planer is being used. But the biggest benefit is going to be the mobility of the unit. By being able to scoot this unit out of the way, it opens up this whole area in front of me as a staging area to put together large pieces of furniture. And secondly, what I have another project in mind for is to build a torsion box assembly table for this area. So by moving this simply out of the way when it's not being used, it'll open up a whole new area of my shop to use. So it's a good thing. Well, that's it for the first part of our shop tour. I started getting a little long-winded, so I thought instead of boring you with one long episode, I'd break this one up into 2 different parts. So be on the lookout for the second part coming out in just a few days. If while you've been watching this episode, some questions or comments have come to mind, send them to us. We'd love to hear them. Go to our website at www.woodworkersresource.com. From the homepage, navigate through to the video blog page. There you'll find a place to leave your name, email address, and your question or comment. And I promise to respond to those just as quickly as I can. Also, while you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free monthly newsletter. Our newsletter is all about woodworking and the woodworkers that make this craft so great. So sign up there today. Another great place to check out on our website is the Woodworkers Resource online gift store. There you'll find all kinds of woodworking themed merchandise such as t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all with different woodworking sayings on them, much like I'm sporting in this episode. So if you're still knocking your head against the wall, trying to figure out what to get Dad for Father's Day, look no further than the Woodworkers Resource online gift store. And your purchases there do help support the podcast and keeping our website up, so anything that's bought there is greatly appreciated. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. And just remember, until next time, be safe in the shop. Thanks, everybody. How it's actually hooked to the wall itself is through concrete bolts that are drilled into the cinder block wall through 2x4s. The 2x4s are there just simply to have a place to screw the brackets for the, I don't know what I'm talking about.